don't offhand. I know Katie has a grasp on that. So.
Oh, it's live now, Paul. We're
good.
Paul,
well, then why don't we get started, since we are now live here on Zoom. Our audience is filling up nicely. Thank you, folks, for joining us. A lot of seats in front. Pandemic humor. So good morning, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Judging by the size of the audience that's here, the number of folks that are live streaming or watching this on live stream, and folks that signed up for this on demand, this is a pretty hot topic. And we've got a diverse, not only panel, but also diverse audience set. I think some of this information we're going to share is going to be new for some of you, refresher for others. This assumes you've got more than a basic proficiency within Google's tool set. But as we move forward here, we'll try to keep the conversation as broad as possible. But if you do have specific questions, please, load those into the chat. So again, thank you for everybody that's joining us live here on Zoom. And for those of you that are watching this live, restreaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And for those of you watching this on demand in the future, this is being recorded on December 1st, 2020. And I mention that because things change pretty rapidly. Many of us know this, just seeing everything from changes to Google's algorithms, to policies, to how their tools are functioning. And you'll hear a bit about that as we go through this morning. So again, thank you for joining us, and why don't we get rolling here. So today we're going to talk about, again, an overview of what Google Local Services is. And as I mentioned before, we've got a pretty diverse audience. We have a number of folks that are in a lot of service industries, past home services, and other services. So I think it's important to get just a basic understanding of what this is, get us all on the same page. And for that, Chris Fasano will tee us up. Chris and Matt will then take us through some of the different, what are the differences between Google Local Services and Google Ads? What is Google Guaranteed? Just kind of clarifying what this is and how it's different from Google My Business and those kind of things. We'll take you through how to qualify, how to get started, some best practices and tips and tricks that we've been picking up as we've been going along here. And please, let's make this a dialogue. For those of you that are on Zoom, please use the chat function or Q&A and post questions. I'll try to moderate and answer those or throw those to our panelists in real time this morning. And for those of you watching this on social media, please jot notes in the comments, or for those of you watching on demand, you'll see email contact information throughout. So we'll try to answer those questions offline as we can. So let me introduce our panelists. So immediately to my left on your screen, Dr. Chris Fasano. Chris has a PhD from Albany Medical College in the field of neuroscience, and over the last decade has applied that to consumer behavior, more specifically consumer behavior in the digital setting. Chris is great with predictive analytics and understanding how consumers are making decisions, what influences those decisions, and in particular, how all of that is happening in a digital space. Chris leads the digital team at Overit, which includes everything from search engine optimization, search engine marketing, automation, paid advertising, content development. So great resource, and happy to have him on the panel.
Good morning, everyone.
Immediately to his right is Matt Smith on our team. Matt is a senior digital strategist with Overit. Matt's an electrical engineer from Clarkson University. And like Chris, has built up his career on the digital side of marketing, working largely in search engine optimization, search engine marketing, automation, paid advertising, and in particular, what we're going to talk about today, Google Local Services. So,
hey, got an engineer and a neuroscientist on the panel. I'd like to see that here. Good stem.
You can build it and break it.
So thank you both for joining us today. And again, folks, please put questions as we're going through as we go along. So welcome to our panel. Thank you for joining us in the audience. So let's get started. Chris, let me have you begin and give us sort of an overview. What is Google Local Services, and what is this thing? And I put a screenshot up here of the kind of thing that we might see. So give us the big picture and get us on the same page.
Cool. So thank you for everyone that's here listening to this. And this is a really, really great topic. I'm excited to talk about it because I think if with all of our clients and people in looking to diversify their paid advertising, I always talk about Google Local Services. It's one of the first questions I ask. If you are able to be on Google Local, and we'll talk about what that means. Certain industries right now that are allowed to use this platform, you need to be using it. It is one of the most valued ways to get your business, in particular local presence, locally found. So really backing up a little bit. So Google Local Services, GLS, is what we refer to it as, is a paid advertising platform that's offered through Google. And it is in addition to, this is important, and not to replace Google Ads or AdWords as we know them. So traditionally, you think of Google and search ads. This is not that. This is different. And I think up on the screen there, Paul has a shot of those little 3 panels with that green badge there on the left. Those 3 windows, the 3-pack, that is a Google Local Service. So what GLS ads are designed to do are to help local businesses really capitalize on local searches. So it's like an extension of your local SEO strategy. Now, they rolled this out in 2015, Google, as a sort of beta test in San Francisco in very specific verticals, but the immediate success of it led them to expand it quite rapidly. And in my opinion, I'm going to give you 2 major things that I think is really sort of makes an incredible value for lead generating activities for local businesses. So I'll give you those 2, and then we'll sort of go through the nuts and bolts of what it is, how you get signed up for it in a little bit. So let me give you the first one. Number 1 is the real estate. So you cannot get better real estate on Google outside of Google Local Services. They are at the very, very top of the page. Okay, so before, higher than the map, higher than paid ads, and obviously higher than the organic results. They sit there, and this makes it almost impossible to miss. So if I'm looking for something locally and you're in that pack at the top, I'm seeing your company. So it is a guarantee that I'm going to be seen if you're up there. Okay. And just a quick couple numbers that backs this up. I found this online doing through some research here. Google Local Service ads receive almost 15% of all local search engine clicks. Okay. 15%. And another interesting stat I saw was that when those Google Local Services ads are present, 25% of clicks are on paid results. When they're absent, that drops all the way down to 10%. So there's a 15% increase on clicks on paid if those ads are present, meaning people are more likely to click on that ad for the service that's being offered there. So you can't pass up the real estate. That'd be the number 1 thing I would suggest. The second part about GLS that really gives it such a high value is when you sign up for this, Google vets the company. Okay, there's a vetting process there. There's a certification that's done. They check your certs. They do background checks, and they even go as far as to guaranteeing the service. Meaning, if a consumer buys the service from a Google certified Google Local ad, and you have a problem as a consumer, it goes wrong or something happens, Google will investigate, and if they find that there's a problem, Google, not the company, Google will reimburse you up to a certain amount. So it does offer a really nice a value for local services. You're right at the top, and it does take some anxiety off the consumer who's looking to vet out and read reviews by giving you some sort of to make you feel good about your purchase because it's already been guaranteed and vetted by Google, and it puts it right there for you. So I'll now let us sort of move through because I do want to get to the questions, and we'll talk a little bit about more of the details. But when you leave here today, I think that what you're going to see is that this is an incredible value. If you can do it, you need to do it. It's fairly simple to set up, but there is an expertise to it. In particular, if you do have more than 1 location with your business, or even a franchise, or you're operating multiple locations, it does require a bit of an expertise. And I hope also we can show you how, from our experience, we can help you with that. So with that, Paul, I'll pass it back to you. We can get into the nuts and bolts.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris, you raise a good point. And again, we've got a pretty diverse audience, and want to make sure that this conversation is tailored to, that you're getting out of this what you're hoping. I know we have a number of folks here that have 1 or 2 locations, and I know we have some folks in the audience or that are watching this on Restream that have many, many locations. And so please, if you have questions for us as we're going through, let us know. And Chris, as you mentioned, the real estate here is fabulous. And I think from a consumer decision-making standpoint, if I see that combination of reviews and a guarantee in that placement, that starts to give me some good buying signals that this is something that I can feel that I can trust. And I know we'll talk about how to get Google guaranteed here in a minute. And again, Chris, as you mentioned, this is in the first position. This is above the ads, but different from the ads. So Matt, take us down that road a second. What is the difference between Google Local Services and then the ads that we're used to seeing for all sorts of different products and services?
Well, in general, with Google Ads, you're in an auction competing with everybody else to try to show up in those 3 coveted advertising spots, typically 2 at the top and 1 to 2 at the bottom of the page. And the means with which you compete vary between the content you serve to solve the problem and what you're willing to pay. With Google Local Services, you get set up, you sign up, and you will show up in that top panel. There is a capability to scroll from a left to right perspective inside of there. When this was initially rolled out, it was rolled out at a fixed price based on the service you had. And if you were to receive a lead, you would get that lead at that price. With Google Ads, you're not clear on how much you're going to spend per conversion. So there's a lot more variability to Google Ads, and they kind of serve different purposes. This one, you're getting the top of page, you're getting the guarantee, and you just stand out and look attractive to the consumers.
Another point I would mention too, Matt, is that the thing that drives Google AdWords are keywords. And keywords are typically, when you're building a Google ad set, you, the creator of the ad, has to do the research on the keywords. Your ads are only as good as the keyword research you do, because keywords trigger the ad. So if you're terrible at creating good keywords, your ads will never show. People won't click on them. In Google Local Services, they are not keyword dependent. So when I type in, for example, we do a lot of pest control work and some HVAC work and other things like that. If I type in pest control near me, Google Local Services, Google in that platform, they have identified keywords that are going to trigger that. Whereas on Google Ads, I have to tell them trigger it on when someone types in pest control near me. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of Google Local. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of which keywords do I use? And there's a whole ton of optimization, a lot of time that's spent optimizing keywords. And in Google Local, you do not have to do that. You are reliant on Google, which can sometimes, we are a little hesitant of relying all on Google, but trust me, they want people to click on those ads because that's how they get paid. So that's another difference there. The keywords are not set by the individual with local services.
Yeah. And to that note, Chris, this is, it's our impression that this was rolled out and intended for business owners to set up for their industry and just be present in that spot without all of the expertise and technical background to get it to work. So the intent was there for it being much, much simpler and easier for your business to show up in your exact business category.
Correct. And so, Paul, to the other questions on the slide, do I need both? I think that Google Local, like most things, it should be a part of a diversified strategy. I mean, it depends on your budget, obviously, because, you're paying for these leads, but they really do they're very different in their, Google Local Services by its nature is local oriented, right? So depending on your business, Google Ads might offer a little bit of sort of a different flavor. Plus, not everyone clicks right on Google Local, and people go through the normal vetting and they'll scroll down. And if you scroll down and then I see you appear in the map, then I see you have a Google ad, it lends a little bit of credence to your business. Wow, they're here, they're there, they're here. So it offers another point of contact or visibility for the customer. So do you need both? I don't think you need both. But if you're multiple places, it obviously helps. Can I appear both? Can I appear both at the same time? You absolutely can. That would be a goal. And what industries are available? The industries are ever changing. It's a lot of home services. There are a lot of law offices and law services. There's a complete list. You can easily find them online. It's hard for me to list them here, but most home services, glass service, auto technicians, handyman, house cleaner, HVAC, pest control, etc. Those are covered. I'm seeing a question here. how much of the country is covered by Google LSA. I think it's pretty widespread throughout the country. Mainly the bigger markets obviously have better coverage. They are in Canada. I know they are in Canada rolling out. Not sure about other global places. We can look into that. But I do know they've rolled out in Canada, and they are pretty now widespread throughout the country. Matt, I don't know if you know any more about locales.
No, you can find them across the U.S. and Canada at this point, and you almost hard put not to find them if you put in kind of a very common business. The one last comment I wanted to make about appearing in both, knowing that you're appearing in both, you'll never get charged for both time with respect to search ads and or local services. So there's no harm in appearing in both. And just like Chris is saying, getting your brand out there, getting the extra impression is going to linger and resonate in people's minds longer than the one that's not seen.
Thanks.
Yep.
So let's talk about the differences now between Google Local Services and Google My Business. First, I guess, what are those differences? And Chris, you started to describe this, the presence on the page, but then in particular, what are the relationships between the two?
So when we start talking Google Local Services with a lot of clients, frequently they'll mistake Google My Business for their local services. Google My Business is a search listing where you really highlight all of the great aspects of your business and the fine details like name, address, phone number, and additional contact information or ways to be contacted. Google Local Services is a paid advertising service. Not to confuse the two, what's unique, when you go to list, say you're a multi-location business, your Google Local Services accounts are going to be linked to one of your specific Google My Business locations. So they work hand in hand, and it's good to clearly understand the two of them. More often than not, when we start talking with our clients, they're like, but everything's set up on my Google My Business. We were able to look at it. So being able to differentiate between them and importantly link to them for your specific locations that you want to serve. As well, the Google My Business is how Google Local Services puts your reviews into those advertising tiles.
Right. So, and that's a key thing, right, Matt? What Matt and I have learned in doing this is that there's a little bit of Google magic that happens that makes you appear in the front three. And a lot of that magic has to do with what your Google My Business page and what that sort of looks like. For example, reviews, Matt mentioned. Reviews, we know, are a major driver of consumer purchase behavior, but they're also a major driver of Google's algorithm as to where you get placed, right? So, for example, if you have 200 reviews and you're competing against somebody with a lot less reviews, you more likely or not would be placed higher in that map pack. It doesn't always rule that way. Matt and I have also learned that your level of interaction in the back end of Google Local, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, matters. But the nuts and bolts from this slide is there is a difference. If you have Google My Business and you have that set up, it does not mean you have Google Local Services, and it does not mean that it is set up. You do need Google My Business to have Google Local Services, but you have to take the extra step in setting up Google Local, because Google My Business is just an organic search sitting in there with a map. It's not a paid advertising mechanism, and that's what you get with Google Local, but you need GMB to start off the process.
And just one last note, if I can, Paul.
Go ahead, please.
Like we talked about showing up in Google Local Services, showing up on the map, showing up in search. Just like Chris said, Google My Business is highly important for you to compete in the map pack and show up in that map listing against your clients, or what they call the snack pack, where they show the first 3 listings of the most relevant businesses.
And so with that in mind, and Chris, you were describing this earlier, that presence on the first page seems to be pretty powerful. If I'm in that top set of Google Local Services, if I'm off to the right with the Google My Business, my map, if I'm seeing ratings, and we'll talk about guarantee in a second, and I'm appearing organically, that's a good combination for consumers to say, wow, I typed in a service that I need. I arrived at a particular page, and you guys are everywhere, including a green check mark, which we'll talk about in a second. I assume that influences consumer behavior pretty positively. It seems like an obvious question, but can it be repetitive, or is that just simply a good thing?
that you're shown right up on the top. I think I mean, it's definitely a good thing. And I think the numbers, some of the statistics really support that. 15% of all paid clicks on a local search happen there. And you see a jump of 15% on all paid if there's a Google local present. So I just think, our eyes and humans have become in the feed culture where things are scrolling. We see first what's there, and we kind of don't really want to go too much further if we don't have to. So if I'm looking for a pest control company and it appears right there, it's got 150 reviews, it's got a green check that's guaranteeing something, that's enough for me to at least click right then and there. I'm going to click. And then from there, bang, you can make a phone call and you can get your service taken care of. So it really tries to streamline it. And the goal of any business, especially a local one, is to get to the top of Google, and you can't get much more on the top than where GLS puts you.
Yeah, that's great. I have a question coming in from our live stream, and it has to do, Matt, a moment ago you were describing that in order to have the Google local service, and the question that's coming in is, what if I have multiple? We're going to go next to Google Guarantee.
Yeah, we will talk about that, Paul, because it's a very important question, and it's a little tricky, but we'll get to that.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the Google Guarantee. Chris, you mentioned this a minute ago. If you're not happy with the service, Google's going to cover it up to a certain point. Tell me a little bit more about this, Chris or Matt.
You want to take that, or me?
Yeah, I mean, you hit on it pretty good when we started out, but the Google Guarantee, after they vet your business with respect to, are you a licensed contractor for the state requirements that you're in? Or do you have the proper insurance for the state that you're in and the requirements for the industry that you're in? And then they'll perform background checks. And that is also based, we're going to go into more detail, but on the state you're in and what the requirements are. Is it the business owner, every technician that works for you, those type of things entering the home? So once Google puts all of that together, and they also want to tie in your Google My Business, and that's how they can really confirm that you are a brick and mortar business that exists. And maybe we should have touched on that to begin with. With Google My Business, you cannot have a Google My Business account if you do not have a business mailing address. That is how they verify it. That is how they eliminate internet scam type of businesses being represented.
Right,
so,
they literally mail you a postcard, Matt, right?
And there is no way to work around that. Yeah. So you have to have a business address in order for your Google My Business to be vetted. So in Google's eyes, once they've checked those 5 primary boxes of business license, insurance, background checks, reviews, and a brick or mortar location, they're willing to give you that guarantee because they know you're working in that industry and they've seen you demonstrate through multiple efforts that you really are there, present, and working hard to get that business and not doing anything, let's say, shady, for instance. Once you have that guarantee, they, as Chris mentioned earlier, will offer a money-back guarantee up to a certain amount of the type of industry and job that it is based on customer satisfaction.
And it's like a lifetime cap of $2,000. So I think that's the number that Google puts on it right now. They'll investigate. If they do find that, the claim that you made was warranted, they will actually give you the money back. So it's a really nice feature. You have reviews of actual consumers saying the company is good, and now you're saying that Google thinks that they're good enough where they're going to put their money up just in case something happens.
So how does that process work? I have a mental picture of Google sending out a bunch of private investigators and people to show up and interview me, but I know that that's not the reality. So just give me the overview.
Not yet, at least, Paul.
Right, or maybe they do, we just don't know yet. But just give me a quick overview of how that, what are the sort of steps that I would need to take in order to go through this process?
So in order to get the process rolling, typically we do this for most all of our clients, and we can do most of the pieces for them to assist them with it. But it starts out by just, identifying the business location, and stating that you're putting in your application for Google Local Services. At that point, you then are going to provide the business documentation for licensing, the business documentation for insurance. You're going to initiate a background check. And I think this has been one of the trickier parts with the service since they've begun it. Originally, I've been working on this since 2018, and originally they were using Pinkerton background checks, and they've now moved on to a different company. And the background checks are all done online with email verifications. I wouldn't say they're nearly as invasive as somebody showing up at your door. They are looking, I believe, 10 years into the past and just understanding who the business owner is always, and then when relevant, who's going to be going into the consumer's house and doing the services. And they'll do that background check. It can take them anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks based on their backlog. I think they've become a lot better recently. When Pinkerton was doing it, they seemed to just sit out there for a while. I've found that all the other steps, the license check, the insurance checks, they're usually processed and approved within 24 to 48 hours. So the background check is the biggest part of it.
And just I'm sorry, Matt, but along those lines, Matt just touched on, but it's important to know that certain verticals, certain industries require more and different levels of background checking. So for example, like in pest control, it's just the owner, right, Matt? Whereas like an HVAC, I believe the technicians also, or people coming into the home, are background checked as well. So you could imagine that if you have a team of 15 or 20 techs, it could take a lot of time and such. There's some strategy that goes into this. It gets a little interesting. And some industries are a lot less lenient on not so much the background check, but who amongst the business has to get the check. So it does vary from business to business.
Right. And to that note, Chris, it's varying on a state by state level of what they deem necessary. For instance, pest control in Florida does not require the technicians to be checked, and pest control in North Carolina does. So these are things that we encounter through our experiences, and our expertise can both prep our clients and get the whole idea is to get the process moving and move through it as quickly as possible so we can start showing advertisements and getting business for our clients.
So one of the questions that came in from the audience, and this was around, I think the question came in when we were talking about Google, paying off on a guarantee if there was something. So if I provide a service in my business, it's not up to standards, the client protests and Google says, yes, in fact, you're entitled to some sort of guarantee payment. If I understand the question right, I'm assuming that will affect my Google account. So if I have a business that then has to, where Google has to step in multiple times and make these payments on my behalf because of poor quality, I'm assuming this affects my overall Google account or my Google local services. If I'm understanding the question right, and if I'm not, please clarify.
Yeah, I mean, we have not seen any negative actions taken on any clients with respect to their Google local services as far as your guarantees being taken away or threatened to be taken away. So, and when you say Google account, Google is pretty good about putting the dividers between your Google My Business, your Google local services, your Google Ads account. So at this point, we haven't seen any negative actions like that take effect. I think Google's guarantee is based on if they can understand that the business did, in fact, give good service and do everything they were supposed to do with good intention, then their guarantee is honored. And we haven't experienced anything too much stronger to sway that kind of viewpoint.
Obviously, if it's a repeat offender and a business 4, 5, 6 times is getting like Google guaranteed, investigations, I imagine it would have some toll, but we have yet to see, I've yet to hear of a customer actually filing a complaint with Google in relative to the guarantee yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good to know. And I think probably the bigger fear was, and I think we've answered the question that was raised, but really the fear would be if we continue to provide bad service, does Google take away my business listings or other kind of things? But it doesn't sound like that's the case, at least unless there's something really egregious. So let's get started then. How take us through the process, Matt. If I'm a new client, and this is where I think we'll address the multiple locations, but take us through those steps on how this gets set up and how we do it. And in particular, we'll cover some of the questions that are on the screen here.
Okay. I mean, I've already talked a little bit to it, but when we have a client that we're going to get set up on Google local services, our first consideration is how many locations do they have? What areas do they want to serve out of those locations, which is also relevant because we've found that you can take a client that has 4 locations and service quite a bit of that area with one Google Local Services. To back that up, we've found that the performance and the number of leads and even the cost per lead goes down if we can link up a Google My Business that's closest for each service. So we tend to take a look at how many locations we're trying to serve, what their Google My Business accounts look like, if they're all up to snuff, because we really can't even start until those are in place. And then we have a discussion with our client about their business licenses, their insurance, their reviews, and the background checks that we're going to need to go through. Once that takes place, somebody in our digital team goes ahead and actually does the legwork to build the accounts out and start providing the information. The interesting point with that, and particularly in a recent change in the last 4 months, is we have to get the business owner, or at least a representative of the business, typically we'll do it via a video chat, and have them initiate the background checks out of the proper logged in Gmail that represents the business owner, Gmail or G Suite account that has to be affiliated to it. This is the one step where we have to engage the business owner and or representative, as it can't be done another way. Once that takes place, we can monitor it. I also get notifications as to status being approved. And once the business is set up and approved, we can then clean up their profile, not clean up, but set up their profile with respect to budget and specific service areas, whether it's by zip code or by a more finely detailed map to get it started. One of the really tricky things that we have dealt with, and I worked with their onboarding support teams for quite a bit of time to get this to function well, is getting multiple locations and getting the businesses to be able to access them. For those of you that have a finer understanding of working inside of AdWords, AdWords uses a tool called a multiple client center, or MCC, in order to bring different business entities together. For Google Local Services, if you have more than one location, we have to set up an MCC account for you and then put your businesses into that account. Otherwise, if we link your Gmail or G Suite address to one Google Local Services and then add 3 more behind it, you'll only see the initial account. So this software, being a Google product, isn't really their finest effort at software. Let's say they're still working the kinks out of it and still building the tool. It took even their support staff quite a while to get me the proper access for our clients. And if you think of an MCC, we use MCCs all the time, but we don't provide client access to them because we'll have 8 to 10 different businesses working together out in an MCC. So this was a significant hurdle that we had to work out with their support staff to get it to function right. And even in dealing with them, they kind of shed the light on, you know, we rolled this tool out. We thought it was going to be done by business owners for business owners, and now realize that business owners don't have the time to invest in the setup and the management of the tool, and they need an agency and even some of their own internal administration to interact with the tool to demonstrate what's going on, where the leads are going, how many are booked, how many are completed. And if there's a dispute, like you get charged for a lead that's somebody you're not capable of servicing. So that's a big part of both the setup and the hurdles that we've seen in setting up newer clients.
Yeah, so looking at the how do I make my ads stand out? Let me talk a little bit about that for a second, and then we can talk about how you monitor the leads. So really making your ads stand out, a little tricks to it that we've learned is location matters, like Matt mentioned. Your proximity to where the person who enters that Google search really matters. So if you are like Matt said, if you service a huge area and you only have one office, and someone comes in on a local search at the very periphery of your service area, and there's another service provider closer to that periphery, they're more likely going to get served a little bit higher than you, because Google is linked to your map and it knows your proximity. That's why if you do have multiple locations, it's very important that you have a local service ad account for each one. Like Matt said, like what we have Overit have finally cracked and figured out how to get done efficiently. That's really important. Your reviews matter. And finally, what we learned matters is how much you're in the interface of Google Local Services, playing around, marking things as booked, going in there and really going and using the tool. Google knows when you're marking things as booked, disputing leads, it shows them that you're engaged and you're active in the account. And if Google sees that you're engaged, that means that you're engaged, and they're going to move you up because they know you're actively using this and they want you to be successful, because if you're successful, they're making money too. So being in the interface, so that leads to the next point. How do you monitor leads and close sales, et cetera? There's what we call the dashboard, a Google Local Services sort of interface. You log in, you can go in there, and it'll show you all of your calls listed right there. You can listen to the calls, you can play them back. So it's a good customer service tool. And when you booked a sale from it, you simply click a button, booked. It marks it as booked. You can make notes. You can put a dollar amount in there, how much it turned into. And then the other thing that you can do is you can dispute leads. So if I do happen to get all the way through and call you, now you're going to get charged for that call. So if that work turns out to be a bogus lead, someone from a different state or outside the service area makes its way through, you can simply press dispute. You dispute the lead, and Google is very, very good about giving you that money back. They're in our experience, they don't really give you a hard time. You just have to give them a good reason. This was out of my area or something, and then they will give you the credit, your money back. But it's up to you and the client and the customer to really be in the interface and doing that. And you'll be rewarded by Google by being moved up. So that's really how you sort of monitor your leads. It gives you a cost per lead right there. Anything else, Matt? I mean, it's a fairly simple interface, right, for the customer to really see what's going on the back end. Oh, I think Matt froze a bit. This is the world of Zoom we're in. But again, like, very simple to use. I think most of the battle is getting it up and running. Once you're up and running, it's fairly easy to monitor that. And again, there's some tricks of how you can increase your performance and moving up the map there a bit.
So Chris, take me back a second. This is a Google dashboard. So once I've set up Google Local Services, I have basically a Google dashboard that'll show me those leads. It'll show me the calls. It'll show me the integration with that. Does this wholly replace other tools like, say, CallRail or other dialing, monitoring systems, those kind of things?
Yeah, it's a good question, Paul. So Google does not give you the ability to place a track number as the number that will call. So Google provides you with a number that is, has your area code and where you're located. It's matched. So up here in the 518, you'll get a 518 number, but it won't be from an outside call tracking company. It is a Google number, and that may or may not cause problems for you. A lot of people like to have all of their calls tracked in a certain way through their CRM, but there are different ways we can pull this into to get good proper attribution and pull it into a more global dashboard. But the number provided to you is by Google, so it's outside of the normal tracking systems. But again, there are ways we can pull that in to your CRM of choice to get the proper attribution. And the dashboard itself is it's a very basic back end. You can sort by date or custom range. How many calls did I get in last week? And it tells you when they came in. It tells you how long they were for. Again, you can listen to each call. You can know if they were booked or not. So it gives you not only good analytics, for how many calls and what converted, but it's a good customer service tool, again, because just like other tracking softwares, you can listen in. And what I like to do for our clients is, if I see that they converted 60 to 70% of their Google Local Service leads, which is what I'm seeing, I want to know what happens to the other 30%, right? The ones that were lost. So we can go in there and we can listen and we can say, was this a real lead? What happened here? Why? How could we do better? So it does help in that front as well.
And I'm not sure, Chris, if this is a question for you or Matt, but can I link this to other profiles that I might have, like Thumbtack?
So it's a good question. I do not believe you can link it to other things like Thumbtack, because Thumbtack would kind of be almost a competing entity to Google, right? So what Google Local Service used to do was it used to link to other competitors, and they took that away. That was in beta. So for example, like if they clicked on Overit and looking at them at a marketing agency, they would then underneath it list other marketing agencies also in the area that gave you the ability to then say, you know what, I don't necessarily want to go with this one. Let me click here. But they got rid of that. I think they got rid of that because the feedback was that the customers didn't like that. So to my understanding, I don't think you can, but we can double check. But I don't think that Google would allow an outside to be linked to it.
Okay. I'll come back to this when Matt rejoins us. In the meantime, actually, Chris, I think this would be a section that you're also comfortable with.
Yep.
So talk to me about bidding then. How do I?
Yeah. So, okay. So, Google Local Services was doing a fixed lead cost per industry. So pest control was around $33 a lead, and maybe HVAC was around $36 a lead. Others were $22, and it was fixed, meaning that you paid the same price for every call that came in, regardless of what happened. And that is excellent in terms of paid advertising, because as we know in Google, it doesn't work that way in Google Ads. You could pay $100 conversion, you could pay $20. It depends on the demand, it depends on the auction. Well, it was too good to be true for Google Local Services, because now they are moving to a bidding system, meaning that in addition, when you set up, so typically the way it worked is on a profile, you set up your max budget. So you told Google Local, I don't want to spend more than $400 a week on leads, okay? So it'll cap you, and what it tries to do is spread that money out across the week so you don't just get hit up for it in one day. Now, in addition to setting a budget, because you still have to set a max budget, you have to enter in a bid that you're willing to pay per lead. So that's now up to you to say, you know what, I'm only willing to pay $35 a lead, or I am willing to pay $45 a lead. And what that does now is for people competing to get to the top spot, it's another sort of thing Google uses to place you. Now, Google claims that it doesn't only go by the bid, because that would be kind of unfair, right? For people that have if I have one review, but I'm willing to pay $200 a lead, they're going to push me all the way to the top. That's not what's actually happening here. Google still is going to take into account a more holistic, what's your reviews like? Are you interacting? What's your location like? And then all of that the same, they'll then go to your bid. And if you're willing to pay $5, $10 more, they're going to put you up higher a little bit and get you better placement. So it is important now that you have a bid strategy, and this now really, it makes it a little more difficult to do your forecasting and your budgeting, right? Because it's demand-based, but we are moving to a bidding strategy. Google charges per lead differently across all verticals. There's a range depending on what industry you're in. You can look that information up depending on your industry. And you can dispute charge leads, as I mentioned. It's just as simple. There's a button that says dispute, and you literally press it, and you give some info, and that's how it works. I think there's a number you would call as well. They make it very simple to dispute. So yes, there will be bidding now. It's not only going to be running by bid, but bid will factor into your placement.
So let me ask this, and let me put my Google ad hat on. If I was an HVAC company, I might have two different lines of business. One could be service, the other could be replacement units for a household. The service call might be a $100 charge. The replacement unit for heating and air conditioning system could be a $5,000 charge. My desire to pay a certain price would vary based on some of those things. So how would I, develop a bidding strategy based on that, so that, I'm not listed and I don't want to pay $50 for a lead, but I do, I would if it was for a replacement unit, but not necessarily for a service call. And thank you for staying with us during the commercial break. Joining us back now live is Matt Smith, who is connecting to audio. Matt, welcome back. He had to put more diesel in the generator or something.
So the question of Paul is asking about, how do you come up with that bid number? So in the example you gave with HVAC, certain products or service lines are more expensive than others, and maybe you're willing to pay more to get said lead. In Google Local Services, to my knowledge, you cannot differentiate the kind of lead you want based on the product offering. It's more of my company does all of these things, and if you want one of them, call us. So it's more of it's going to be a one number thing. And I think that number really is borne out on your marketing strategy and your budget, right? So, working together with your marketing team, or if you have a partner like at Overit, an agency, we're going to help you understand. We have your marketing plan, we have your paid advertising strategy and budgets. So we're going to know a good range that you can afford based on what your products cost, what your lifetime customer value is, all of those things. We'll have a good sense of that, and you will as the customer as well. And you just kind of go in there. I would recommend to you that you don't start your bid too high, right? So if the pest control was $33 fixed lead, well, start it at $35 your bid and see how you do. If it's not working out, you can bump it up $5 to $40, and you go incrementally and see where it takes you. So I think that it's just, it's more of a your business, your products, and you have a budget, and get a number that fits within that budget and go for it, and then monitor it and see how you do. And if you feel like you can get more leads, up it by a few bucks, $2 to $5, and see if it gets you some more. And that's how we'll approach it here.
And with that in mind, I think it also speaks to, lifetime value of a customer. If I brought you in on a service and you had a cleaning or a tune-up for your furnace, you would be more likely to retain me as a vendor for a future purchase that might be larger. So even, making sure that your, teams are trained for the upsell at the right time. And then also, I think that could speak to the value of, or the reason why you would want to continue having Google AdWords, on the page, to also promote, if it's, pre-season, time to get that furnace tuned up, for the winter, having that information on the page could help as well. Matt, let me back up for 1 second. Anything else that you wanted to cover on just sort of how to get set up, multiple locations?
I wanted to expand a little bit on what Chris said about the activity. So keeping in mind, and I apologize for leaving there, we've got some kind of faulty cable modem that's got to go. But when you're placed in that Google Local Services top bar, you see 3 tiles. Those are not the only 3 Google Local Services tiles. So if you're in a pest control industry, or you're an attorney in a populous area, there's going to be multiple people competing for that space. So when we say activity rewards the user, we have a user that has disputed more leads per month than anybody else. They are very good about going in and demonstrating all of their booked, completed jobs. They don't necessarily share their dollar amounts and everything, but they are in there at least 2 to 3 times a week. That user in the same vertical was receiving their leads for $5 to $6 less and in higher volumes than the other users. So Google hasn't posted this activity rewards you mindset anywhere, but even if you think back to the early days of the search engines, they've always liked to see the activity and the data and worked with it. Things as simple as bounce rate and interaction. So it's really been proven that if you get out there, you will be rewarded. And in turn, that business tends to show up almost always in the first 3 leads. And this is why we stress implementing it and then working within it to maximize it. So it's just a really important part of this tool to get it right. That's and Chris, unfortunately, I cut out right in the middle of you talking about it. So I wanted to make sure people really understood how valuable that activity is.
It's important to stress that. I mean, once you get it set up, it's not just to sort of let it ride. You got to get in there, and you have to be monitoring it and playing with it. And the more you do that, the more you will be rewarded for it, for sure.
Yep.
Okay. And Matt, anything else? We were starting the conversation. I think largely Chris covered everything, but anything you want to add to the bidding part of this presentation?
As it's a newer part of what they're doing, again, you don't want to be overbidding, you don't want to be underbidding, and finding that niche is going to be something that we're going to work really hard with our clients to do. We've tried to replicate this service in straight click-to-call ad campaigns, which are very similar to what it is, and have found that we don't really get the highly qualified conversions at the costs that Google Local Services delivers. So we recognize the value in it. We stress it to our clients as, your best tool to keep your conversion costs down and your leads flowing in. The bidding aspect is new, and we're going to, keep an eye on it, the functionality of it, and how to optimize it the best we can.
Right. And even if you have to pay 10 more bucks to get a Google Local Service lead, the odds of that converting are higher than said maybe a different sort of ad mechanism. So it might be worth it. And this is where good data tracking really matters. And so putting together that list of, I had 100 Google Local Service leads and I had 80 Google AdWords, but I converted 90 of my Google local services and only 40 of these. So you got to do that sort of math as well. And in the end, it appears that Google local services gets you a better conversion rate. So if that's the case, you might be willing to pay a few more bucks in this mechanism.
Sure. And Chris, like we always stress, that's, when we talk about sales enablement or connecting your marketing stack, the ability to see what these leads result in your internal
Paramount
business and the ROI that you get on it is huge.
Great. I think we're in the home stretch here. It's about 10 of, and I'd like to end a few minutes early just to give folks a chance to breathe and not have back-to-back Zooms. But I think we are pretty close to the end. So parting thoughts, Chris, let me start with you. If there's one key takeaway, if our audience, just remembers simply one thing from today's presentation, what would you want that to be?
And I would say, I stress real estate on the search engine. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. The goal of Google in the future, in my opinion, maybe people disagree, is they don't want people to go to your website. They want you to live in the search engine. That's where they want you to stay, because that's where they make their money. So if they can make you stay there and never have to go anywhere else, they are happy. And Google Local Services is the epitome of that, because you can stay right in the search engine, you can click right on that, and you can go right to that service, and you don't leave Google. You're still in Google. So Google wants you to live there, and this plays to it perfectly. So if you can, and you are a business in an industry that Google Local Services serves, this will be today. You're going to leave this and you're going to see, can I do Google Local, and how do I get started? I really think that you will find there is incredible value. You're going to get high quality leads at a good price, and it will just bolster your real estate position on the search engine. You're not going to get any better than at the very top of the page.
Okay, Matt, one key takeaway.
Same thing Chris is saying, and also just the cost per lead. Every business wants to increase their profit margins. If you pay less for the leads, you're more than likely making more money on the business. It's really a big part of it. And since I've been hands-on with this tool for quite a while, I'll stress that having experts working on the tool is invaluable. It'll expedite it, and it will also increase your return on it. And the software is ever changing. Let me put one part out there for real data enthusiasts. If you have a business information tool that you use to connect all of your different data sources, this is a Google platform, right? And the Google Buy Tool Data Studio is not even integrated with it yet. We were using this and working with their support team. We said, how come we can't even export all of our leads out of this tool? And within a matter of a week or two after that conversation, they created a monthly export tool for your entire business. They tried to make it look and seem as simple as Google My Business, but it's more complicated than that. And getting it up and working right requires a little bit of expertise, and we've formed that expertise.
That's great, thanks. So again, thank you to everybody that was joining us here live on Zoom. A couple housekeeping notes. So for those of you that are watching this live now on Restream on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, we're going to mine the comments and reach out to you offline with unanswered questions. And so we'll respond within the next day or so. Quick plug, we have a webinar this Thursday. Our sister company, Smith & Jones, is hosting a webinar from noon to 1 o'clock on Thursday on the subject of telemedicine, or in particular, website manner. So for those of you that are watching this live, we'll send a follow-up, not only with the contact information for our panel, but an invitation to join that webinar if that's relevant to your industry. So again, I'll leave this information up on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to either of the panelists. There may be some unanswered questions, or a deeper dive that you'd like us to take into your particular business. I know there were some questions about multiple locations, international presence, and things like that. So again, thank you everyone for joining us live. For those of you watching on demand, again, this was recorded on December 1st. Some of the information that we were discussing here may have changed since then, and even if you're watching it tomorrow, it's possible. Chris, Matt, thank you for joining us this morning. Appreciate it getting us rolling. Any other final thoughts before we go?
Nope. Stay safe, everyone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks everyone for joining us.